Welcome to Barnstorming PA. This is our special day after the elections in 2021 mega smorgasbord roundtable. If it goes well, we both get credit. If it's a disaster, I'm blaming Taylor because it's all his idea.
It was my idea. we try and keep it to 4 usually, but yeah.
We have some newcomers, which we're very thrilled about, and you'll hear from them in a second. But I was teasing Taylor that I think our rate of coming up with an idea or a rule and then revoking it is about 30% for each of us, because I know we've had at least 2 conversations where Taylor said to me, at most 3 or 4, Jordy, at most 3 or 4. And then out of nowhere, he's like, let's invite 9 people. And I was like, okay. So I
it's all about
Jordy Combs.
Flexibility.
Right. I am on the Lewisburg Borough Council. I'm also a facilitator for the Hub for Progress, which sometimes overlaps quite a bit with what Barnstorming's doing. Taylor?
Yeah, my name is Taylor Lightman. Pleasure to be here, co-producer of Barnstorming PA. We're a podcast about politics in Pennsylvania. Not exclusively, but usually. I used to work in politics, and now I'm working for a neighborhood revitalization organization. So yeah, I'll kick it to Dwayne.
Hi everyone, I'm Dwayne Heisler with s4e9. I'm also on the executive committee for the State Democratic Party, chair of the Progressive Caucus, and involved with quite a number of progressive organizations. And I'll toss it to Jess.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jess Britton. I am the president of the board of directors for Action Together NEPA. I'm also the vice chair of the Columbia County Democrats. In my day job, I serve as a restaurant manager, so that provides some very fascinating dichotomies in my life. And I think we're going to Cyril.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Cyril Mikuleko. I'm a progressive columnist with the Bucks County Courier-Times and the Intelligencer. I also have a show with the Raging Chicken Media podcast every other Wednesday. This is my first time here, and just really happy to be here. So thanks. And I'm going to just pass this off to Dana.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Greenwood. I am from Scranton, Pennsylvania. I'm also a member of SEIU Healthcare PA and a leader in my local chapter. I'm the president. I'm a registered nurse and involved in quite a few different grassroots organizations within my community. And this is also my first time on as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. We're going to end with Jenna. So Steve, you, and then Jenna.
So who's going first? I'm Steven. I'm Steven Cruz. I'm a reporter with the Pennsylvania Capital Star. I cover Pennsylvania House, campaign finance, redistricting, and general political what's going on in zones. There we go. That's a word now.
Steven's a returning champion. It's a pleasure to have you back.
Nice to be back.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jenna Henry. I am an activist and organizer from Center County. I live in State College, just a couple miles from Penn State's main campus. I wear a lot of hats. I'm the deputy director of a nonprofit called Better for Pennsylvania. I was also the elections coordinator with Central PA United, and I am also the secretary of the Keystone Progress Education Fund. Right.
Also returning champion.
Also returning champion. Yes, Cyril and Dana have now learned that the bar for being a returning champion is it's accessible.
Very high. Very
high. So I just want to make sure we plug a couple of things. Cyril, I didn't realize that you have a show. You said every other week with Raging Chicken?
Yes, I do on Wednesdays with Kevin Mahoney.
Does it have a separate name?
Just the Wednesday show, since it's on Wednesday.
Show. Yeah. I hope he's got a sense of humor, because that's a lot better than Out to Coop. Because one time, his co-host, I'm blanking on his name, was trying to explain it to me, and he's like, "It's out to Coop, but it's like a coup." And I was like, "Oh, clearly that one needed another round in the idea room for an audio medium." So the Wednesday show, thumbs up for clarity.
Yeah, no, it's him and Sean Kitchen.
Oh yeah, Sean.
Yeah.
Awesome. And PA Capital Star, I mean, is it 2 years old now? Maybe, is that right?
I think we're coming up on 3 years in
3 years.
January.
I mean, it has been such a breath of fresh air, and I'm not just saying that. I mean, you don't know the difference, but because you're coming on, but like, you know, we in places with small papers, like the Daily Item, which is our paper, you know, the coverage that you guys provide is so good, and you have the Hispanic edition, so it's just a real asset. And I think that you all survive by donations in part, right? So people should head over there and donate.
Donations and wealthy benefactors who remain anonymous.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Anything else we need to plug? All right. Couple of housekeeping things, of course. We also podcasts, like any form of independent media, aren't free, so please support us if you can. At our website, there's links to follow to make a one-time donation at PayPal or to become a patron. T-shirts are coming soon, and stickers. And everybody who becomes a patron will be invited to some sort of an event that will be fun, and I think I'm signed up to provide some food.
It's a paella. PA.
Oh, right.
You need to see it written out to get the joke, but the PA capitalized.
Paella.
Jordy,
yes,
you can write that on your ticker.
Yeah, on the captions.
Yeah, and you know, make a one-time donation or a monthly through Patreon. Even though we're just talking, it's not free.
That's right. One version of that paella I've done, I did actually make meatballs with Pennsylvania venison, and it had pieces of rabbit. So paella, if you want to, you know, I shouldn't talk too much, but it is a dish of whatever is on hand. It's not only one thing. So we have a couple of patrons.
Wait. And also thank you to our new Patreon subscriber, Harvey and Jen Partica. Thank you so much. And yes, beautiful.
Yes.
Two thumbs
Thank
up.
you. 2 thumbs up. And also Lisa Johnson Harvey, who's been a great commenter in the past. And my mom is also a patron, Marianne Von Beck. She told me she can't afford $5 a month, so she's just going to send me a check for $60, and I'll recycle it in. I don't know why that math worked for her, but you know, we've all got our moms. So is there anything else on housekeeping? Oh, real quick, Taylor, I want to read our first piece of hate mail. Is that okay?
Yeah, is that all right with all y'all?
Is that all right with y'all?
We actually got 3 pieces of hate mail, so I don't know which one you're.
Let's hear it.
Yeah. I totally stole this from another podcast. I'm just going to read a few choice bits. So this was by email. It said, "Please remove your socialist drivel from my inbox. You have no idea what you're talking about and are doing nothing but spreading propaganda that helps no one. You're probably overly involved white progressives who think you, academics, bureaucrats, and politicians know how to run our lives better than we do. Save the arrogance and Alinsky tactics." That's an interesting question. Would Alinsky have had a podcast? I don't know enough about Alinsky to say. Does anyone feel like they're an Alinsky expert?
It's so interesting that he's talking about being an elitist, and yet he mentions that person. Like, give me a break.
I mean,
knows who that is, right? What an ass.
That's become a big buzz thing, though, in the right-wing conspiracy theory circles. I'm always fascinated when someone drops an Alinsky.
Yeah. I'll also say, like, since like this person just wrote it on email, we did find out that they were they led a wealth management group. So just one of these blue collar, hardworking Americans that's fighting for the little guy, you know, that just wants bank consolidations, you know, just
listen,
non-elitist stuff, you know.
Pulled up by his bootstraps.
Exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I will point out that I am a former academic, and I am a government employee at $100 a month for Borough Council. But this is a business, although it's more of a wealth draining operation than a wealth management operation at this point.
Yeah, we're very much net negative. But let's move on.
Well, I just did want to share. We're 4.8 out of 5 on Apple Podcasts, and there's a review there that says Barnstorming PA is always good for a laugh and super informative. We need more Apple. If you're on Apple, please leave a review, or we'll have to keep reading you that one until the end of time. All right, quick icebreaker. We're gonna make this fast. I'm going to give you 4 dishes, and you have to decide, each person, whether it's something you would add to your table or would never be on your Thanksgiving table. Okay. And 3 of them are PA related. One is this cranberry dish from Susan Stanberg, the NPR reporter, called Mama Stanberg's Cranberry Relish, which has sour cream, onions, and cranberries. And I'm actually going to share my screen so you all can see pictures of these. Let's see. Well, as soon as I figure it out. The second one is stuffing balls, which I discovered in a Pittsburgh newspaper, and it seemed really cool. What have I done here? I've created an infinite time loop. Okay, let me try that again.
Flawless execution. Flawless.
Yeah, listen, that's why we get paid to do that.
Look, based off of the 2
Wait,
that you're
can you say them
starting
again?
with, I'm very concerned about what the other 2 are going to be.
Yeah. Here we go. There we go. All right. Here is a picture of the cranberry relish. Here are the stuffing balls, which are literally just balls made out of stuffing and then fried and then have gravy on them. Your third choice is something called the Pennsylvania Dutch raisin pie, which is raisin, sugar, your typical aromatics like allspice and some vinegar. And fourth is pickled beets and eggs. Okay. Questions? Everybody know what the 4 are? Okay. I'll call on you. Okay. We'll start with Steven this time. Which do you keep? Which do you never have on your table?
Oh God. I mean, the one that I think I will never have is I'm not an egg fan. Or not, I know I like eggs. I don't like hard-boiled eggs. So like the pickled egg beet thing, no. I know that probably like betrays all my Eastern European ancestors, but I don't think I can eat that. And you know what? Look, I could say the stuffing balls because you wouldn't eat fried bread, but I'll go with I would try the PA Dutch raisin pie. I actually quite like raisins, and PA Dutch, kind of good.
Very good, very good. Dana?
So I'm a bit of a carb queen. I as well will go with the stuffing balls, and because it seems like a safe bet, and the raisin pie, but I'm gonna say no to the cranberry thing and the pickle.
You only have to say no to one. Two can be neutral.
Well, I'm gonna say no to the pickled stuff.
Okay, awesome. Jess?
So am I really the only person whose family did like the stuffing balls? Like that's like a legit family history thing. Because when you'd cram 25 people into my Aunt Faye's living room to try to eat, then you would just throw them at each other if someone wanted them. So I'm just baffled by the fact that like I seem to be the only one familiar with this. So I'm gonna take those for sure. We don't have them anymore. So
oh look, your cat has an opinion.
Oh yeah, my cat is gonna weigh in. He's Sammy. He's annoying. Sorry, y'all. But I would drop that cranberry relish because I like cranberries, but it shouldn't have onions in it. I don't understand that.
Okay, Cyril, you're next. Oh, you're taking a sip.
Yeah, I'm with her. Stuffing balls, yes. Cranberry relish, that seems pretty funky.
Yeah. All right, Taylor.
I think I'm gonna agree with Steven here. I think I would like to try the raisin pie, and my impulse is to say no to the cranberry sauce, but I'm kind of intrigued by it, so I think I'm gonna say no to the beets.
Excellent, Dwayne.
So you've mentioned that cranberry relish before. I actually tried recipe, and I tell you, never again. No, it was bad. But I'll have to tell you though that Jess, I think that you've intrigued me with a new kind of Thanksgiving tradition. I love the idea of stuffing balls and tossing them around. I think I'll have to go with that. Yeah,
it's a game changer. Just saying.
I mean, what food isn't better circular and fried?
Exactly.
I think it's a great idea. Yeah, let's go for it.
Jenna.
Okay, am I the only like real Pennsylvania Dutch person here who has had pickled eggs with beets with every Thanksgiving meal for their entire life? I
guess that's what we're learning because it's
just a central Pennsylvania thing. Like I don't know.
It is in fact.
I love pickled eggs with red beets. I have since I was a child. I make them regularly just to have. So I'm definitely keeping those. I don't know. I think it's a toss up between getting rid of the cranberry thing and the raisin pie. They both seem really awful.
You got to pick one.
All right. I mean, I guess if I have to pick one, I'll get rid of the cranberry.
All right. I myself, and people who know me know how much I detest hard-boiled eggs, but I have also made that cranberry relish, and it is of the devil. I would never have it on my plate, on my table again, and I would just eat the pickled beets, which I love, and eat around the hard-boiled eggs, which I detest hard-boiled eggs more than almost anything. And I definitely want to add the stuffing balls. I'm super excited to have picked that one up. All right, so we have had way more fun than probably anyone banked on. Let's go around. Does anybody really hankering to talk about local elections? We're going to talk about local elections and like one or two that you were following closely.
Yeah, I'll
Go for
talk
it, Dana.
about my local election. Okay, so we had quite a few, but the one that was the most important, in my opinion, was our school board. So Scranton, the teachers were really hopeful that the board was going to be overturned, and so Scranton teachers right now have been working without a contract for 5 years. They're negotiating for things like financial reimbursement and healthcare coverage. So there were 3 new hopefuls on the ballot, 2 of which were cross-filed on both tickets, and 1 was straight Republican. So the teachers weren't happy. You know, they didn't get everything that they wanted, but they did get 2 of them. So some things leading behind the election. So with early turn-in mail-in ballots, there were some articles in the newspaper that were a little misleading, and then we ended up having a school board meeting. Well, the teachers had a school board meeting, the community, and that was the day before the election. So that was really only helpful for the voters that were going to come out and pay attention and come out and vote on election day. So those, you know, they got 2 of the 3 hopefuls. So they got some of what they wanted, but not everything. So, and they went on strike today. So we'll see what happens with that.
Cyril, I don't know Bucks County well enough to know. Like I saw on your Twitter thing, there was a Penbridge or Palisades was the school district you were looking into, or both.
I was looking into multiple. Right, there was a lot of different, school board races throughout Bucks County, and in Bucks, we had a situation that's probably not uncommon from your else, where we had kind of like big money or dark money, and dark with a Q because we know who's giving it, but they're spending it on like kind of like QAnon candidates, right? And so you have like people like Paul Martino, right, who pumped over $500 or some dollars into school board races across the state. A lot of that was kind of focused on the, in Pennsylvania's first district, which is all of Bucks County. He has his school PAC, the school PAC. You have Jeffrey Yass funding money into this. You have the Commonwealth Children's Choice Fund. There's one component that's just kind of like muddying these races, right? Then you have the Reopen movement, Reopen Bucks, which is a pretty extremist movement, and they're kind of like framing things that's happening in, with health and safety plans in this kind of like apocalyptic language, right? So you have them like kind of like pushing out their shock troops, going to all these school board meetings, right? Even ones they don't even belong to, comparing like wearing a mask with child abuse, comparing it to the Holocaust. One of their members, and this is even part of a lawsuit, accused masking of being a satanic ritual, right? And then finally, we have a local militia, right? The Proud American Patriots Network. And what they are is a cell of the 3% militia. And they were kind of forcing themselves into the debates around masking within the Central Bucks School District, which is in Doylestown. And, thanks to the progressive community, like people have been tracking them. They kind of were able to give me information about them, and they announced that they were going to have like this picnic with the Reopen movement and essentially stake out a school board meeting starting at noon until like 7 o'clock, right? And so their leader, who's former combat vet, like told the Bucks County Courier-Times in an interview that masks represented the tyranny he fought against in Afghanistan. He would not tolerate it here in America, right? So this is like the framing of school board, school board races and school board issues, which is supposed to be about kind of like proper funding and allocation of that funding as well as curriculum. And then within that, you have these extremist candidates. We had out and out QAnon followers, right? People who are just unapologetically transphobic or bigoted, running in Penridge, running in Palisades, running in Central Bucks School District, up and down Bucks County. And, what was disturbing, or what is disturbing, is the fact that like these aren't disqualifying features for the Bucks GOP, right? Like if I had a political party, I would want to stamp out extremism. Their big tent or their base actually is the extremism. And these folks got elected into school board. So you have a school board member who's QAnon, who's transphobic, anti-LGBTQ, who actually said at one school board meeting that she wanted like scriptures posted, on the walls, to counter pro-LGBTQ messaging, and even suggested there be safe spaces for white people and Christians, and specifically men. Women weren't mentioned, or girls. And this is what Bucks County's facing now. And this thing that kind of like, I think the Democrats and the progressive community have to reckon with, when kind of deciding and organizing around the best ways and strategies to move forward. As it's pretty disturbing. And sorry for that long rant going off there.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's one of the reasons, I thought it was good to have you. I don't know if we can get a little bit of sort of the Scranton. I mean, Scranton had the labor problems going on already. Dana, is that right? So, like, did this kind of like toxic mess of either masks, or I call it anti-racism instead of anti-CRT, but people who are worried about CRT hysteria, did that come into the labor issues at all in Scranton?
No, it's more about the cuts. There's been a lot of cuts to preschool, programs. The fact that they don't have librarians anymore, they furloughed a bunch of paraprofessionals. Just not really spending the monies that they had on proper things, such as I guess they fixed up the bleachers in the stadium, but then they cut the marching band. So one student actually spoke. It was a very powerful board meeting. One student spoke about, how are we going to have home games? All of these other surrounding areas coming to our field, and they'll have these new bleachers to sit on, but they're not going to have we're not going to have a marching band. So like, what kind of school spirit are we going to bring to that?
I'm going to say the only thing that might be more Pennsylvanian than pickled beets and eggs is marching bands. I do not know how you not have a marching band in a Pennsylvania school.
Yeah. So they cut things like that. And then they gave themselves a hefty, raise and created some administration, jobs that didn't exist in the past. So the teachers have been silently, just dealing with this during COVID and for the past 5 years. I shouldn't say silently, but sitting on the sidelines, just taking the brunt. Like it's been put on them, and now they're sick of it, and that's why they ended up going on the strike. And then they cut their health care on top of it for the strike, which hasn't been done in the past. So that was a big thing too. There's a lot of animosity there between the community, the teachers, and the board.
Jenna, you said that there were some school board races that you were following.
Yeah, here in Center County, not just the state college area school board, the Republicans were going really hard on the school board races here. There was a lot of that dark Q money dumped in state college. We were, all four of the Democratic candidates won, fortunately. So we didn't get any Republicans on the state college area school board. But just outside of state college in Bellefonte, where there's been this mass controversy around the school's mascot, which is the Red Raiders, with, of course, full Native headdress as the logo. Well, the school board recently voted to remove the logo and change the name of the sports teams, and that created this, so on top of the masks, now they're angry about having to give up their racist school logo, and ran heavy these 4 candidates who all 4 won. So kind of terrifying things happening out here. You said, why is Raiders racist?
Yeah, sorry. I'm sorry if I'm being too white, but
so their mascot was a Native American.
Dress. I was just thinking of the word.
Right. No, the Red Raiders with a Native American.
Now I get it. I'm not that dense.
Yes. They, however, did not. It was amazing to me how many people needed it explained to them why calling Native Americans Red Raiders was racist.
There's a school district in Northumberland County that literally has a wooden Native American, the kind that would be in the cigar stores, like in the lobby. And it's actually named Shikellamy. So weirdly, it's named correctly for a leader, a Native American leader from the 18th century. Anyway,
I can speak to. We had some school board races in Union County that I was following fairly closely, I mean, I feel like in general, like Democrats did well in some places, and they did really poorly in others. We actually picked up 2 seats, or the Democrat aligned things in Lewisburg, and then in other places, there were more of these insurgent candidates that actually won in more rural and more traditionally Republican places. So I don't know. It seemed like a bifurcated result.
I mean, one of the things about, and full disclosure, my wife is on the Lewisburg School District, but she wasn't up for election. Now she's Virginia Zimmerman. But I'd be curious if other people observe this, but there was a slate of candidates who decided to run, obviously way back in the primary, and it was only this summer when this school district had a chance to vote for sort of basically a safer plan for masking. And a couple of the Republicans on the board, and this board has a really strong norm about being bipartisan, they voted against it, including Lisa Clark, who is a nurse, but voted against it. Then a PAC formed in Lewisburg, a state PAC, and supported those 4 candidates. That then provoked local conservatives to try and have a write-in candidate run for the 4th unclaimed Republican spot, a guy named Matt Schumacher. And he got 700 votes announcing about 72 hours before he ran. He didn't win, but it was interesting that there was a race that was moving along, right? And then this sort of summer, I call them the school brush fires, came along, and it scrambled that. And Jess wants to talk about North Pittston, but Cyril, I don't know if you want to tack back. I think Palisades also had one of those student groups parents organizing on behalf of like sane candidates. Is that right? Well, we'll get to you in a minute, Cyril. Jess,
Sure.
You said you had a school district? Pittston?
Yeah, sorry, I had a little chat thing pop up on me accidentally. But
No worries.
for the Pittston area school district, there was just one candidate who is, awesome progressive. Kathy Healy was running against a slate of 4, and apparently they felt very intimidated by her because they teamed up to send out this really gross, honestly, just really bad, like just from a quality standpoint, mailer accusing her of not being responsible in her time as a coach in the area, and allowing students to be injured and things. And these are all things that are totally unsubstantiated. And it was just really disgusting. It was done, a week out, and they were really called out on the carpet. And she blew them all away and was the highest vote getter. So props to her for that. So like a little happy news on a school board race. But just calling that kind of stuff out when you see it is super important, and she's going to be an amazing school director. So,
Stephen,
yeah, I would just jump in. Like, the one thing I've gotten from my interactions with people who have been like in touch with these races is it seems like the Democrats who won are the Democrats who just were kind of fearless and like, this is not a problem. Like, they kind of like wouldn't play the game of talking about critical race theory, talking about having moral clarity in what you talk about. People are attracted to that. I mean, I sadly never got to use this in a story, just because usually juggling a few things. But I actually went to Bucks County and did some door knocking with a central Bucks candidate whose name I can't remember, so I can't kind of mention them. But I remember distinctly her knocking on a door, and I believe we weren't wearing masks. Look, we were walking around, and without getting into what the mask debate was, like, she goes up to the door, knocks on it, it opens, and then a guy's like holding a mask to his face while holding a dog back. So you can tell like he's taking this seriously. And then I think she kind of like quickly put on a mask and was asked like, well, what do you think about masks in schools? And she's just like, I think we should just follow the experts. And she's like, and the person asked like, well, that's in a yes or a no. I want to know, where do you stand on masks? So I guess this is to say, like, I don't know if this person won or lost, but in that interaction, I saw someone who seemed like they weren't really sure of what, they were trying to modulate what they thought. And it sounds like what I've heard is like people who won are just the ones who are just like, yes or no. Like, they had a clear position and they kind of stuck by it the whole time. Anyway.
And Stephen, I'm curious, this is tacking a little bit from school board, but I think one of probably the most interesting races that happened was the Harrisburg mayoral race, because if you looked at it, it just like there were an absurd amount of write-in votes. Can you give us like what happened with that and who won and what was the result?
Yeah, no. So Wanda Williams, the city council president, beat our current mayor Eric Pappenfuse in the primary, and Pappenfuse has been in for 2 terms. He's a controversial figure because he just he's been close to developers, and he's a Democrat, but he at times has endorsed Republicans. He would argue this was Republicans at the state level. What Pappenfuse can point to is he managed to get some legislation through the General Assembly by working with Republicans that expanded the city's taxing authority, that helped to get out of Act 89, whatever the state's municipal bankruptcy law is. So he traded in a way that I think that he would argue was good, but local Democrats didn't like. And basically, he got a primary from it from City Council President Wanda Williams, lost, and then tried to run a write-in campaign to stay in office, and that did not succeed. Wanda won with about 2/3 of the vote. So, he tried, he failed. It was a lot of noise for what ended up being nothing. We got multiple mailers from Pappenfuse near the end. There was a spate of weird text messages that I believe might have come from the state Democratic Party, but were telling people who expressed uncertainty about who to vote for, not to vote, which is the Democratic Party might need to work on who it has volunteer. And it was, it was a mess of a race.
For people listening, all of the eyebrows of the of people went up about if you added it up, it was about 4 feet.
Eyebrow. So like I had one of these interactions. Someone texted me and said, I'm with the Wanda Williams campaign. I want to know, like, are you going to vote for Wanda? And I said something to the effect of I'm unsure. I expressed an uncertain, because this has been a race where it's just, if you live in Harrisburg, you're kind of tired of it because there's just been a lot of, I would say, personal attacks going both ways. And then, so I was uncertain. And the person's response was basically like, if you haven't made up your mind for Wanda, then we don't need your vote. She's going to win. Don't bother voting.
When you're walking in a city and you smell something and you can't tell where it's coming from and it's like 2 blocks away. Like Taylor and I know people in Harrisburg and I can't follow every election, but it just seemed like something in the primary had put a bad smell in the air because several people we know who are in Harrisburg politics just seemed like no one was talking about it. So I appreciate you shedding some light on the bad smell. Okay, my metaphors need work. And I sort of am not apologizing for how I misspelled Pappenfuse because I'm just sure that there are more P's and F's in that name. Dwayne, you wanted to mention Ed Gainey in Pittsburgh?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the high points of really what happened in local races, to see Ed Gainey winning the mayoral race in Pittsburgh, especially being a member of SEIU Healthcare PA. And, the largest employer in the state of Pennsylvania is UPMC with over 90,000 employees. And there's some accountability that really needs to happen, when they take home $1 billion last year during the pandemic. And there are so many problems with healthcare in our local communities, including the closure of certain facilities and hospitals because they're, not profitable. So I really am looking forward to what Ed Gainey is going to do and the commitments that he made to fully represent the people of Pittsburgh and actually can have impact on the whole state and what that healthcare system looks like in the state of Pennsylvania.
In Scranton, our mayor, she won in the special election. And I know this is really sad, but I'm not 100% sure if it's a 2 or 4 year race that she won. Dwayne, do you know? With Paige?
Yeah, she's only she just won now. It's a 4-year term for mayor. Okay. But she hasn't been in that long.
So she won in a special election as an independent, and then she was endorsed by the Democratic Party. So she won now by 70%. So that was huge. Some things that she has done in the small time that she has been mayor was some stuff for small businesses. She secured, I think it was like $2.5 million in relief grants. And she's donated 5% of her salary back to the city, refusing a city car, gas card purchases, things like that. The city has been in a disarray. There was a special election because our former mayor, was found to be pretty corrupt and is in prison. So we need this change, and this was definitely a good thing for the city. Oh, and the Joe Biden Expressway as well. They
Wait,
implemented.
is that actually infrastructure or is that a metaphor?
No, it's a real
No.
thing. They changed the Scranton.
Oh my gosh, Jordy, driving up to Scranton, my Waze pops on and says, you stay on this road for whatever, 40 miles, and then exit on the Joe Biden Expressway. And I went, what? You know, after like 5 years of nothing but big Trump signs and giant cutouts and all of this crap all over the place, how refreshing was it to see it? I actually took a picture of it. Maybe it wasn't the safest thing if you're not supposed to text when you drive. I don't know. I just had to. I was like, snap, this can't be real. Where am I? Am I still in Pennsylvania? What's happening? Yeah, Joe Biden Expressway. There's a Biden Street as well. You know, if you look at all the messaging coming from our president, there's a lot of comparing of Scranton and working for Scranton. And he is constantly lifting up the city of Scranton, and the city of Scranton has his back. They're behind him.
Okay, but shouldn't the Joe Biden
I wanna-
Expressway be a train line? I'm sorry.
It should be, but
Okay,
I want to
Taylor,
talk
go ahead.
about this other
Oh,
race.
that's coming too,
No,
right?
hold on,
That's coming
Taylor.
too.
Hold on. We got to say something else about Paige.
If
Very nice.
I want
Taylor,
to
hold
say
on.
one thing about Paige Cognetti. Paige Cognetti is and has been for years a member of Action Together NEPA. So this is someone who ran as a progressive, boldly, loudly supports progressive organizations and has not run away from that. And I think that's just really telling in this area. And we just want to shout that out whenever we can. And she's been an amazing supporter of our organization. And we need more women, first of all, right? We need more women running for office, but we need more progressives being loud and proud about the fact that they're progressives and that they're willing to put that out there so voters know it and can support them.
She's also, she's just somebody who moved into Scranton, if memory serves, right? She's not, as Jenna would say, she didn't grow up eating pickled beets and eggs.
They probably have different regional cuisine in Northeast PA.
Well,
for the first time too, like our city has been in financial ruins. I mean, this she also was able to finish 2020 with a budget surplus, which was an amazing thing.
She got all kinds of outside funding. Like she's a wall. I mean, she went after money on that. She wasn't leaving any money on the table, and she was going after those competitive dollars to bring them back to Scranton. And she was able to do it. I mean, look at the time she spent with the Auditor General. So that tells her how she knows how to kind of work those things, and she's doing it on behalf of her constituents of the city of Scranton, which is so exciting.
There's one more mayoral race before we move on and maybe talk about the broader implications of what happened here. Like these are all great victories, but we lost I think we lost the top four, or Democrats lost the last four top four judicial races. But I just want to also say that last week I had mentioned that the Milton mayoral race was going to be something to look at. Because there was a Democrat, more moderate Republican, and then sort of a MAGA write-in person, and it looks as though the Democrat won by exactly one vote, which is nuts.
Tom Aber.
Yeah, Tom Aber. Yeah,
by one vote.
Very interesting dynamics in that race.
I assume it's going to be a recount.
Probably, yeah.
We can't go to the judge elections quite yet. I mean, I have to say that I'm as I said, I'm on Lewisburg Borough Council. There are 5,000 people in Lewisburg, 4 wards, which I haven't double checked, but that seems like it's very well represented. Like people in Lewisburg are getting a lot of representation. And in the 4th ward, which is historically the most mix of blue and red, Marlena Lira, who is also a transplant to the area from California, originally in Massachusetts most recently, who's been organizing vaccine clinics on her own. She's a specialist in substance abuse and harm reduction. She won by 9 votes. She and I were out canvassing on Sunday in the 4th. We talked to a couple of people with big Trump signs. Always comment on the garden and the flowers. That's a good thumbs up. And that election 2 years ago was run by a Democrat against the same Republican by only 5 votes. So that was huge. And the other one in Milton, I just wanted to go back and mention the school districts. Brett Hosterman is an incumbent in the Milton School District, the same place that Taylor was talking about. He had one of these like write-in campaigns that was pretending to be about other things, but was really about masking. That person, he won his election at something like 560 to 545, like really close. So just kind of interesting, these places where these dynamics are happening. Are there other?
Jordy?
Yeah,
Jordy, just something to watch. We really need to flag this because all eyes were on Luzerne County for 2020 and for 2016, right? And we would be amiss not mentioning Luzerne County. Luzerne County was a nightmare yesterday. We lost every single seat on the county council. Any of the offices, in fact, lost. I mean, it was just really, really bad. And I don't mean like by a little bit, like they really lost. And so there's a lot of work to be done. And honestly, it's really hard to envision how NEPA Northeast PA can be won if we lose Luzerne County, because that's the big population centers, you know. Lackawanna and Scranton is big, but it's like, you know, they're only about, you know, they're it's not as big as all the votes that are in Pittston and Wilkes-Barre, all those, and Hazleton, all those cities combined overwhelm the numbers that come out of Lackawanna County. So I think that that's a real heads up for us, and we have to get our act together in Luzerne County, and that's something we should be looking at. I don't want reporters flocking to Luzerne County again at the end of 2022 to cover what happened there, right? So it should be a big wake-up call for all of us progressives looking at Luzerne County and looking at Northeast PA. I don't know how we win a governor's race without having strong turnout in Northeast PA.
Well, and if I can just add, you know, on the point about the reporters flooding into Luzerne County, they're already doing it. You know, they're already watching what's happening. There is an NBC reporter who's going to be embedded in 2022 for the whole time. So it's already happening.
Was that the one who showed up on your couch?
Yeah, it's weird.
He's so embedded.
Yeah, no, he's just hanging out. No, but if I was in Luzerne County, maybe that would happen. But I'm
oops, right, you're in Columbia. Sorry.
So yeah, he's at somebody else's house. But no, and I think it's important because Luzerne County went very, very red in 2016, shifted, did not flip blue, but shifted blue over the course of the next 4 years and cut the margin significantly in 2020. So I think a number of things happened, you know, and we'll have lots of time to debrief and do all of that. But a lot of what I think just my, you know, day after take on this with very little sleep is, you know, they saw that margin being cut and they organized like crazy. And I'm sure lots of, you know, money came in, but if we're not willing to meet that with that same effort and the same resources and the same commitment, it's going to get worse instead of better. And Dwayne is absolutely right. We don't win statewide if we don't improve our performance in Luzerne County.
But isn't that also true of Bucks County? Cyril?
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself. You know, absolutely. And just, you know, I wanted to kind of like piggyback on what some of the other folks were saying. It's just like, you know, we do need more like movement candidates and, you know, unapologetically progressive candidates, but we have to focus on building those progressive movements locally first. And I know there's groups like all over, you know, the state that are doing that, like, you know, PA Stands Up, New Pennsylvania Project, etc. And, you know, I think like we also recently, you know, I think a bunch of high school kids like taught us a lesson recently from Central York, who showed us that like organizing and activism gets the goods because they were able to kind of roll back a racist book ban that their school district enacted. And that's part of like the Republicans kind of like national agenda to kind of like use this neo-McCarthyism around critical race theory, which isn't taught in K through 12, but which is a college, you know, level of theory and class. And, you know, it's something that is effective in kind of riling up their base. And a lot of this is just, you know, to be honest, it's a white lash. It's a white lash against the changing demographics of the country. It's a white lash against progress we've made since the 1950s, right? There was a recent poll that came out that showed like only 30% of Republicans think that the country's better off since the 1950s. This was before like the Voting Rights Act, right? Which really was like the first time we were actually a democracy, right? When everyone was able to vote, as well as the progress that we made with like women's rights, LGBTQ, etc. And, I think just to wrap up, just like moving forward, like we need to effectively communicate why this kind of like, why these culture war wedge issues that they're trying to drum up around, actually like teaching just history as it happened. We need to be able to like clearly communicate and like kind of like debunk that. Moving past that, I think like we need to put forth like a bold and progressive democratic agenda, which centers working class, people of color, LGBTQ, women, and youth voters, all those voters that the Pennsylvania Republican legislature is trying to disenfranchise through their voter suppression efforts.
Yeah. Oh, Jess, do you want me to put that somewhere? I'll put that in the chat. Cyril, I hear you, and this is something that we really have to circle back to at a later point. Like as a progressive, like I completely agree with what you're saying. The reality is to get even close to 50% of votes in a lot of the places where I live and some of us live, we have to find ways to bring white Republicans into this conversation. There's no, my county is 93% white. My borough is 90% white. Trump wins by Trump was 70 or 80% in some of these places. So without recreating what I think is really problematic, which is somehow, you're going to choose economic populism or multicultural social justice. Like it can't be either or. So I think that we have so much work to do for us about how to do that. And honestly, I don't think that there's a clever slogan. I don't think there's anything Democratic consultants can cook up. I realize I'm going on too long. I think it takes the long, hard work of doing relational organizing, of building communities of interest around these issues. Dwayne, especially, and Jess and some of us, like we know, for example, with climate change, we can't use the same language that is used by a lot of the bicoastal elite. We have to talk about how we're all stewards of the earth. And find ways to do that. But and we have to wait for NIMBY things to come and then pivot, right? As soon as somebody tries to put a tire incinerator anywhere around here, you get all kinds of people from the right and the left coming together, and that there's a recipe for that. We have to figure out how to take that energy and then build it up over cycle. So I'm sorry, I kind of threw 6 things out, and Cyril, I know it's chomping at the bit. Can you just wait 1 sec? And Jess, I'm sorry, Jenna, were you doing? I'm confusing Jess and Jenna. Jenna, were you going to say something? No.
I mean, I think I agree. I agree with you about, it's a little bit harder in the rural areas, but I think the first thing I really thought though is like, but we had like the first step is actually showing up and talking to those people, which the Democratic Party has just consistently failed to do over and over and over again. And I feel like lots of us, like I know I've heard you say it, I know I've said it, I've heard a bunch of people say it to the Democratic Party, like if you don't start paying attention to rural Pennsylvania, you're going to lose. And we've been saying that for years consistently now, and we just keep losing more and more. So I think just very simply showing up and actually having conversations with people can go a really long way when it comes to getting that progressive agenda across. Because like, my mechanic he's a Trump supporter, right? And I'm talking to him and, something about minimum wage comes up and he starts saying, oh, well, put it's bad for business and, prices of everything will go up. And my husband starts saying something to him like, oh, well, prices are already going up. And like, that wasn't really getting through, but I flipped it on him. I was like, okay, well, what about these billionaires that pay their, these CEOs are getting paid $1 billion a year, and they're paying their lowest person $7.25 an hour. Are you really okay with that? He's like, oh no, absolutely not. That is not okay. And then says to me, he's like, if it weren't for greed, everybody would have everything they need. I was like,
Great.
well, that's a radical progressive idea, isn't it? Coming from a Trump supporter, right? So like, I think that those progressive ideas can really work in rural PA. We just have to get out there and have those conversations.
Sure. And just to kind of like go back to what I said, like when the first thing I said was like the working class. So I meant like the white, obviously white, people are part of the working class, right? It's a multiracial working class that we have in the United States. But, if you think about it, like the Democratic Party has kind of like abandoned the working class like decades ago. And you could probably like trace that back to at least Clinton, if not before that, but they sold out the unions with NAFTA, right? And he was able to kind of like pass that when George Herbert Walker Bush wasn't, and it continued through the 90s and the 2000s with CAFTA and the TPP, which was supposedly the gold standard. So I think like getting back to that and and centering like kind of like issues that pull well, across the board. Like everyone wants healthcare, right? Like everyone wants, better wages, right? Better say in the workplace. And on top of that, like when we're talking about climate change, we need to talk about like a just transition, because we do need the transition away from the fossil fuel economy. And that's huge in Pennsylvania, but we need to not do what the Democrats and Republicans did with workers that were left behind from like NAFTA when the manufacturing sector was gutted, right? So we need to have policies that ensure that with these new industries, with these sustainable industries, sustainable energy industries and renewable energy industries, that we're producing, that we're providing the training, and then making sure that these jobs are union jobs, right? And then I think that's like, one of the big things that we have to kind of like push moving forward.
Dwayne, you put a couple of notes, and I think I know what you meant, but they were a little cryptic. I don't know if you want to say more about.
Yeah, I just want to be clear. There's one party that's pro-union and one that's not. So let's just like make sure we understand that as well. And I know that firsthand in healthcare, and we can see who's like who's really trying to move forward the progressive agenda. It's certainly not the Republican Party. They had a 67 county strategy. They have a PA Dems have a rural organizer, but there's this constant narrative of othering the Democratic Party. It's amazing. If I had a penny for every time I heard a Democrat speak badly of the Democratic Party, gosh, I'd have a lot of pennies. And Republicans, now they might talk badly about this Republican or that Republican, but they never do it against the party. Somehow they figured out that they can all, like sheep, show up and hit the R button, right? And no matter what goes on, and isn't Trump the best example of that, right? They can do that. And we don't need opposition, it seems. Like we're just really good at beating up ourselves. And a good example of that might be like looking at, which had an impact on this election, looking at the two bills that we're trying to get through, right? The reconciliation bill and the infrastructure bill, right? We heard over and over again how Democrats can't get it done and Democrats can't, how about this? Like there were 52 senators who were against the Build Back Better, and only 2 of them were Democrats, right? Like we have to get our messaging shit together. And stop beating up on ourselves. We need to make sure that we are actually not othering. And the term of othering is used in the union all the time. We don't like when members other the union, when they say, well, the union should do this and the union should do that. Guess what? The union is us, right? Just like we're registered Democrats, if we are, right? Like the idea is that you don't other it. It's by us coming together. And so when you actually internalize the thought of othering, you start to look at things through a different perspective, and your own personal messages changes. So I would just encourage people to think about that concept when they're describing their own party, And then, like, how does that inform what you're going to say next? So kind of interesting.
Well, I think we should probably revisit that. I mean, I kind of see both sides, and I think Cyril's analysis is very accurate. There's huge parts of the Democratic policy agenda since the 80s, especially around globalization, that sold unions and working people down the river. They had a chance to make a global minimum wage as part of NAFTA and the GATT negotiations, and they didn't. So the Democratic Party, to me, is always a field of contest, and it is itself a place where there's a fight between economic interests that are not in favor of economic progressive policies and those that are. So, the party, to me, isn't one thing or the other. I'd like to kind of put a box around that, just because I feel like we should maybe just end a little bit on the judge races. Taylor and I talked about this a little bit. We did interview all four of the candidates for the three appellate courts. I'm really bummed that all
the Democratic candidates.
The Democratic candidates, yeah. I'm really bummed that Tamika Lane, Lori Dumas, David Spurgeon, and Maria McLaughlin lost. They were fantastic. Their opponents, some of them were. One, Wallace was not even recommended by the Pennsylvania Bar Association. That is a low bar, no pun intended. So I'm just, in my heart,
They
just
should
saying,
do a whole branding with that. The high bar,
Yeah, right. I'm pretty gutted, and I don't know where other people are on that, and maybe part of the reason goes to some things that Sarah was touching on, that the Democratic brand and or the Democratic Party establishment, regardless of what you're saying, Dwayne, it wasn't doing enough. I mean, I had candidates for 2022 emailing me 2 days before this election asking for money for 2022. And I was like, what are you doing? Why aren't you spending your resources trying to get the vote out for these judges?
There's one thing that could be said. A lot of sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
Just look, I remember there are some Republicans that announced before the 2021 race for governor for 2022. There are also quite a few people who I think specifically waited, and I don't if we're talking about Republicans thinking strategically, maybe give them that. But I don't know. I think with this race, I don't think it should surprise anyone that in the first midterm or first election of a Democratic presidency, the Democrats didn't do well in a statewide race. And this is just kind of one of the rules of political gravity that hasn't really been broken even by all the insane things we're seeing happen in politics. And people spent a lot of money to try and get these seats. Republicans did outspend Democrats, from what I can tell. There's about $7.7 million spent on this race. That includes outside spending and money raised directly by the candidates. I want to say, if I recall correctly, I think Brobson, the Republican candidate, had about, when you add in the IEs, probably about $1 million. Part of it was that McLaughlin had at least $500,000 spent in negative ads against her from national Republican groups. And I think the judicial races are low information. It's kind of hard for people to figure out, how to pick a judge. So I think, getting a lot of TV ads, including, a TV ad that being changed by the Brobson campaign after complaints from the bar. Republicans, it makes sense they want it. And, all Democrats kind of have to do at this point is to look ahead for 2022. What lessons do you have? How can, their statewide candidates, so Josh Shapiro and their Senate candidate, do better?
I think that what happened last night proved to me that the road to the governorship runs right through North Philly. And Philadelphia did not show up yesterday, and we lost as a result of it. I mean, Maria McLaughlin got 144,000 votes in the city of Philadelphia. Tamika Lane, who is from there, got even less. Lori Dumas, who is also from there, got even less. She got 139. Tamika got 140. David Spurgeon did the worst of any of the candidates, which I find interesting because a lot of people were expecting him as the white man to do better, but he didn't. I do find that very intriguing. But Joe Biden got over 600,000 votes in Philadelphia. So I mean, for the city of Philadelphia to only be turning out 144,000 votes for a statewide Democratic candidate, they just didn't show up. I mean, some of the wards in North Philly were only 1,000 people showing up, and that it made all the difference. It really did. I mean, more people voted in Allegheny County than the city of Philadelphia, which is much smaller. So it's
probably about a third. I'm just guessing.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, it just I don't think there's any one factor. I think that there are a lot of different factors. I think that there was a lot of outside things at play, but I think there was also a lot of internal issues. All the candidates I think had fundraising troubles, and they just got obliterated because for whatever reason the donor class of the Democratic Party just doesn't pay attention to judicials. They just don't. We've always had a hard time getting them to pay attention to judicials. I know, just like even running IEs, it's hard for us to get funding to do an IE around a judicial race. And I don't know what we need to do to make that click. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was it. Maybe this is the thing that we can be like, look, this is going to keep happening if we do not start really putting the resources behind these judicial races.
Yeah, that's great. Stephen, do you have any? I don't know if I can pitch to you as like the person with the whole PA perspective, as a journalist. Did you? I know it's very early too, but did you notice anything? Like you mentioned, political gravity. I think Jenna probably gave us a lot of the analysis with talking about North Philly, but people tend to look at who won the vote, but you got to look at who voted, right? Of course, like all of us have been involved in campaigns, how you shape the electorate as campaigns or outside groups is the first thing. So if turnout was higher in rural areas and lower in Philly, that's going to favor Republicans.
Yeah, so turnout was low. I mean, in Philly, they're at about, this is Axios Philly, their turnout was 18.4% on Tuesday, according to unofficial results. And I believe this was according to the committee of 70. Normally, you're looking at 20 to 25% turnout in Philadelphia for these sort of elections. So yeah, I mean, turnout was definitely low in Philly. There wasn't really any competitive elections on their general election ballot. Not that Philadelphia typically would have super competitive general elections, but that's
a great point. The primaries are where most of the heat is and the attention.
Yeah. But we had 40% turnout in Union County, which
35.
Okay, which still strikes me as high. You would think in the high 20s or something like that would have been more reasonable.
Yeah, like I haven't had a chance to look at every county's turnout, but just like what I go back to is that Democrats can definitely talk about like how it could have been won, and I don't mean that as shade, but it's like it would make sense that Republicans are going to do well in this election. Like it's just that is kind of what happens, and I think that when you look at it, one thing I was saying about with local races, like if there's one place that, from what I can tell, Democrats had a bright spot was Allegheny County. There actually were a couple of competitive school board races there, and they actually managed to like flip a county council seat from Republicans. Some of their 2017 babies held on, including a Democratic Socialist candidate, a Democratic Socialist candidate in like leafy suburbs. Whatever Allegheny County Dems or the local organizers there did, I would imagine a lot of Democrats should be talking to them about how they managed to do pretty well, even as across the state there are some maybe more disappointing results for Democrats.
Yeah, for sure. So we're gonna try and sort of wrap this up. I think I started this segment on a kind of down note. Last thing I want to say is I think that there's, for me at least, a line connecting the critique Cyril was bringing up and what Jane was saying about how important the party is the one place where we think we can make a difference. And it gets to this question of execution, which you kind of mentioned, Stephen, right? That like, I feel like a lot of times people come into races and they have a 6 or 9 month time frame or 3 month, and they're told you can do this or this, and they can look at how much money you can dump in ads, and that can make a difference in a single election. But that doesn't add up to the kind of party building and community building that we have to do. That's going to actually bring people in. I sometimes get sick to my stomach looking at how much money is spent on ads, and I think if you paid somebody to do year-round organizing in some of these smaller places in the Luzernes, in the Lackawannas and in parts of Bucks County, then you're not always sort of continuing to rely on the same levers, which is throwing a lot of money short-term into ad campaigns instead of finding ways to build a vibrant party that's really bringing people in. So it's just that's not sexy, and it's and it takes time. And to me, that's part of the problem is we have political parties that are shaped by decision makers who want to make short-term decisions that they can see where the dollars matter in a single cycle. Dana, do you have any, you want to bring it back to Scranton or any other thoughts? And then
yeah, well, I mean, just touching on everything that everything that everyone was just kind of saying, I agree with all of you in certain ways. I think that the Democratic Party does need to come together. But I think that it's really important for us to also be holding people accountable as well. And, a lot of people aren't excited about campaigns. And me personally, I think that our representatives should look more like us. They should be leaders and advocates, like nurses and union members, a pipe fitter or a construction worker. They need to represent the people that are within the communities. So those are some things that excite me in a candidate. That's what I look for. I look for someone that has some things in common with me and that are fighting for the same things. And I know that is the Democratic, way. We definitely are more for working people for sure. But I would just like to see more common people get involved and run for these elections so that we could try to get some of this big money out of what is really influencing both parties, in my opinion. That's just me.
Carol?
I agree. Yeah. And I thought that was great. And yeah, just to kind of continue on that, and with what Jordy said, yeah, the community building and the movement is going to be key, and just kind of having this outside inside strategy, not only within the Democratic Party, but just kind of politics in general, on a national level as well, and getting some new blood, not only as candidates, working class candidates, but getting them in control of the of the parties at the county level, I think is something that's necessary, because you have this kind of old guard that's been clinging on to power for a long time. And, I think, like you said, it's time to kind of turn a new page with the direction that the party and the country's moving.
Awesome. We went a fair bit over. I'm sorry. I was right to not even have a game. Taylor, do you have any, last word?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'll just say I kind of agree with Stephen. I do think it could have been worse. This is kind of typical. And we held on to some seats, and there were bright spots in a lot of places. Yeah, I don't know. It continues.
I'm really proud that none of us actually were this means X for the midterms, right? That actually kind of bugs me. I'm it's really complicated. There's a lot of noise in the system. We need time to look through the data. So
yeah, I agree. I and on Twitter this morning I wrote the word of the day is bifurcation, because I feel there were some really amazing results and some really terrible ones. And then it seems as soon as before the the paint was dry. The moderates were saying, and this is why we need to, why we need to be more moderate, and the progressives were saying this is why we need to be more. And it was just like, oh my God, we haven't even really looked into it.
I think some of them suffer they suffer from premature frame ejaculation.
Wait, you guys didn't want to have a circular firing squad? Sorry, I thought I came on here to moderate one. I'm actually I'm very disappointed.
Yeah.
I'm such a pacifist, I would have like a Nerf gun anyway. Thank you so much, Cyril Mikuleko, and Dana Greenwood. Thank you to Stephen Caruso. Keep doing all of your great reporting. Everybody should go and give money to Cyril. Not just give money. Follow Cyril's newsletter. Give money to Pennsylvania Capital Star so Stephen continues to look so great on video with his style. Dwayne, thank you for everything you're doing with SEIU Healthcare. Dana, we'll hope to hear from you again. I think I've thanked you 4 times now in the wrap up. Thank you all, and this will be out on audio.
Yeah, and donate to Action Together NEPA too.
Oh yeah, and us.
Yeah, and brainstorming.